In a quiet home nestled on the edge of a pine forest lived an extraordinary bobcat named Orion, rescued as a kitten and raised by a wildlife caretaker. Though wild at heart, Orion had adapted to domestic life in stunning ways, revealing a level of intelligence and intuition that often left his human in awe. From adjusting the cabin's thermostat to assisting Elaine's aging golden retriever, Cooper, with his daily needs, he also can turn on lights, fetches items, and even seems to understand human emotions, forming a deep bond with Elaine and Cooper. He was a partner, a guardian, and a performer who lived somewhere between the wilderness and the warmth of a home. Could his remarkable abilities change not just one family's life, but our entire understanding of what animals are capable of? This is the story of a bobcat whose intelligence defied measurement, whose compassion knew no bounds, and whose very existence would force us to redraw the lines between wild and domestic instinct and understanding animal and family. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. In a sun-dappled cabin nestled at the edge of the Ozark Mountains in Arkansas, wildlife rehabilitator Dr. Elaine Foster had created what most would consider an unconventional family. For 15 years, she dedicated her life to rescuing injured animals, nursing them back to health, and releasing them into their natural habitats. But Orion, a tawny bobcat with distinctive black-tipped ears and intelligent amber eyes, was different. From the start, Elaine had found him 6 years ago during a spring thunderstorm, a tiny, trembling ball of spotted fur abandoned in a hollow log, his umbilical cord still attached. The mother never returned. Perhaps she'd been killed by hunters or had simply abandoned the runt of her litter. Whatever the reason, Orion was alone in the world, and Elaine had stepped in. You should have seen him back then, Elaine often told visitors who marveled at the now 30-pound feline lounging regally on her window seat. He fit in the palm of my hand and had to be bottle-fed every 2 hours. Her old golden retriever, Cooper, had immediately appointed himself as Orion's guardian, cleaning the kitten's fuzzy face after every meal and curling around him during naps. Now at 12 years old, with a graying muzzle, Cooper still treated Orion with the same gentle patience, even as their roles had gradually reversed. When wildlife officials finally came to assess Orion's rehabilitation progress, they delivered disappointing news. The bobcat had imprinted too strongly on humans. He would never develop the natural weariness needed to survive in the wild. Elaine had secretly been relieved. By then, Orion had already established himself as something special, something that defied ordinary classification. Elaine's neighbor, Frank Wilson, a retired biology professor with a perpetual squint and an encyclopedic knowledge of North American wildlife, had come over one evening to observe Orion. "I've studied wild cats for 40 years, he'd said, watching with astonishment as Orion methodically stacked wooden blocks in ascending size order. "And I've never seen anything like this. It's not just learned behavior. He's problem-solving. That's rare even in the most intelligent, domesticated animals." Frank had been the one to jokingly suggest that Orion's IQ must be around 200, a quip that stuck after Orion began demonstrating abilities that seemed impossible for a wild animal. On a crisp autumn morning, Elaine sat at her kitchen table, nursing a steaming cup of coffee while reviewing patient files. As a part-time veterinarian at the local wildlife center, she had a stack of paperwork to complete before noon. Cooper snored softly from his plush bed in the corner, occasional dream whimpers escaping his graying muzzle. The cabin had grown chilly overnight as temperatures dipped into the low 40s. Elaine had meant to turn on the heat, but had forgotten in her rush to respond to an emergency call about an injured barred owl the previous evening. Across the room, Orion lounged on his favorite perch, a custom-built shelf near the ceiling that allowed him to survey his domain from above. His ears perked forward as he observed Elaine's slight shiver. With silent grace, he stretched, descended via a series of platforms designed for his use, and padded across the hardwood floor. Elaine, engrossed in her files, didn't notice him approach the thermostat mounted on the wall. With careful precision, Orion rose onto his hind legs, extended one paw, and pressed the up arrow button 3 times. The heating system hummed to life. "Well, thank you," Elaine chuckled, finally looking up as warm air began flowing from the vents. "I was just about to do that myself." Orion blinked slowly at her, the feline equivalent of a smile before sauntering to the kitchen counter. There, he nudged his empty water bowl with enough force to create a clear, resonant ping against the ceramic backsplash. All right, I hear you," Elaine said, rising to fill his bowl from the filtered water pitcher. These morning rituals had become so commonplace that Elaine sometimes forgot how extraordinary they truly were. It wasn't until her sister Jennifer visited from Chicago with her 8-year-old twins that Elaine was reminded of just how unique her household dynamics had become. "Aunt Elaine, is it true you have a real bobcat?" Max called, tumbling from the car before Jennifer had fully parked in the gravel driveway. "A wild bobcat," his sister Maya corrected, with authority. "Mom says he's super smart, like smarter than some people." Jennifer shot Elaine an apologetic look as she unloaded their luggage. "I may have hyped up your unusual pet situation a bit too much. They haven't talked about anything else for weeks." "He's not exactly a pet," Elaine explained, shepherding the excited children onto the porch. "Orion is a wild animal who happens to live with me because he can't survive in the forest on his own. We have a special arrangement." "Where is he?" Maya asked, peering eagerly through the screen. "Or probably watching us right now," Elaine said with a smile. "He's quite curious about visitors, but he likes to observe from a distance first." Cooper greeted them enthusiastically, his tail wagging in wide arcs as the children lavished him with attention. Jennifer hung back, glancing nervously around the cabin. "Relax," Elaine assured her. "Arion has never shown aggression toward humans. He's cautious around strangers, but he's gentle, especially with children. Just let him come to you on his terms." Their first glimpse of Orion came during lunch when a tawny shadow slipped silently through the doorway of Elaine's study. The bobcat froze momentarily when he spotted the unfamiliar humans at the dining table, his amber eyes widening with interest. "Oh my gosh," Maya whispered, clutching her sandwich with white knuckled fingers. He's beautiful. Stay still, Elaine advised. Quietly. Let him decide what happens next. What happened next left even Elaine speechless. Orion approached the table. With measured steps, his gaze fixed on Max, who was trying unsuccessfully to open a small bag of chips. The Bobcat sat beside the boy's chair, reached up with one paw, and delicately took the corner of the bag between his teeth. With a swift, controlled motion, he tore the top open, then backed away and settled onto his haunches, watching expectantly. Did he just open that for me? Max asked, his voice hushed with awe. He did, Elaine confirmed, unable to suppress her proud smile. He's observant. He saw you struggling and decided to help. That's insane, Jennifer murmured, her earlier apprehension giving way to fascination. That's just the beginning, Elaine replied. Throughout the afternoon, Orion performed an ever-escalating series of impressive feats that left the twins squealing with delight and Jennifer constantly reaching for her phone to record videos that no one back home will believe. When Maya accidentally dropped her colored pencil under the sofa while drawing, Orion not only retrieved it, but returned with the exact same color from a spare set on Elaine's desk. While Max was building a tower with wooden blocks, Orion watched intently before nudging a block that was slightly misaligned, preventing what would have been an inevitable collapse. But it was the evening's events that truly showcased Orion's extraordinary intelligence. The autumn sunset came early, casting long shadows through the windows as Elaine prepared dinner. Cooper had settled in his usual spot near the kitchen, hopeful for dropped morsels. The children were setting the table while Jennifer helped chop vegetables for a salad. It's getting dark in here, Maya observed, squinting at the silverware in her hands. Before Elaine could respond, Orion leapt gracefully onto a side table where a touch-sensitive lamp stood. With deliberate precision, he tapped his paw against the metal base 3 times until the light brightened to its highest setting. He then proceeded to do the same with 2 other lamps in the living area. Did he just turn on the lights? Jennifer asked, the knife frozen mid-chop in her hand. He prefers good lighting, Elaine explained casually, as if discussing a roommate's preference, rather than a wild animal's behavior. He gets irritable if he can't see clearly. After sunset. Later, while they enjoyed their meal, a sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, sending a chill through the room. Orion's ears twitched at the sound. He padded to a chest in the corner, nudged open the lid with his nose, and pulled out a folded throw blanket with his teeth. Dragging it across the floor, he deposited it at Mia's feet, who had been hugging herself against the momentary cold. He noticed. You were cold, Elaine explained as Maya draped the blanket gratefully over her shoulders. But how does he know what a blanket is for? Max asked, his fork suspended in midair. He observes, Elaine said simply. He makes connections. After dinner, as they gathered in the living room for board games, Orion's behavior grew even more remarkable. He positioned himself between Cooper and the children, occasionally serving as a backrest for the aging dog, who seemed grateful for the support. When Cooper's favorite chew toy rolled under a cabinet, Orion immediately retrieved it without prompting. They're like best friends, Maya observed, watching the unlikely pair with fascination. They have an understanding, Ella agreed. Cooper was there for Orion when he was vulnerable, and now Orion returns the favor. The true extent of Orion's capabilities became evident the following morning, when Jennifer awoke to find the cabin silent. Assuming everyone was still asleep, she crept to the kitchen for coffee, only to discover a note from Elaine explaining that she'd been called to an emergency at the wildlife center. Had to rush out. Injured eagle. Brought in at dawn. Help yourself to breakfast. Back by noon. Don't worry about Orion and Cooper. They have a morning routine. Jennifer poured herself coffee and wandered to the window where an unexpected sight greeted her. In the misty backyard, Orion was guiding Cooper down the gentle slope toward the small pond. The old dog moved stiffly, his arthritic joints clearly troubling him. In the morning chill, with remarkable patience, the Bobcat walked beside Cooper, occasionally pressing his body against the dog's side. When Cooper seemed unsteady at the pond's edge, Cooper lowered himself painfully to drink. Orion waited, vigilant and attentive, before leading the journey back to the house at Cooper's base. Jennifer opened the door for them, her coffee forgotten in her hand. "You take care of him, don't you?" she murmured to Orion, who acknowledged her, with a slow blink before guiding Cooper to his bed. What happened next left Jennifer fumbling for her phone again. Orion approached a low cabinet, hooked his claws around the handle, and pulled it open. Inside, neatly arranged in labeled containers, were medications and supplements. The Bobcat selected a specific container, marked Cooper joint tabs, and nudged it open with his nose and carried a single chewable tablet to Cooper's bed. The old dog accepted the offering gently from Orion's mouth, chewing it with appreciation before settling back with a contented sigh. Orion then returned to the cabinet, closed it with his shoulder, and proceeded to the water bowl, which he pushed deliberately toward Cooper using his forehead. When the twins finally emerged, tousle-haired and sleepy-eyed, Jennifer recounted what she'd witnessed, with the breathless wonder of someone who had just seen something she never expected to exist. Attain said Orion is super smart, Max said. But that's like superhero smart. It's more than intelligence, Jennifer replied thoughtfully. It's compassion. Throughout their week-long visit, Orion continued to astonish them with demonstrations of his extraordinary mind. He learned the children's routines with unnerving speed, appearing with Maya's hairbrush each morning before she even asked for it. He seemed to anticipate Max's frequent requests for juice, positioning himself by the refrigerator door whenever the boy showed signs of thirst. He successfully opened latched windows when the cabin grew stuffy, operated the remote control for the ceiling fan by pressing specific buttons with his paw, and once memorably unplugged Jennifer's phone charger when it began making the subtle buzzing noise that indicates a faulty connection. But perhaps most impressive was Orion's apparent understanding of human emotions. When Maya became homesick one evening, dissolving into quiet tears after a phone call with her father, Orion approached with something clutched gently in his teeth, a framed family photo he'd retrieved from their luggage. He placed it carefully beside her, then pressed his warm body against her side until her tears subsided. How does he know? Maya had whispered to Elaine later. It's like he can read my mind. Not your mind, Elaine corrected. Gently. Your heart. On their final evening, as they sat around a crackling fire sharing stories and roasting marshmallows, Jennifer finally asked the question that had been simmering beneath the surface of their visit. Aren't you ever afraid having a wild predator in your home? Elaine considered this, watching as Orion delicately extracted a perfectly golden marshmallow from a skewer he'd somehow learned to hold between his paws, offering it to an eagerly waiting Max. I'm not afraid of Orion, she said finally. But sometimes I am afraid for him. What do you mean? Maya asked, accepting her own marshmallow from the Bobcat's careful delivery. The world doesn't always understand creatures that don't fit into neat categories, Elaine explained, her voice softening. Orion is neither wild nor tame. He's something in between, something special. My greatest fear is that someday someone might decide he doesn't belong here with us. But he's family, Max protested, unconsciously leaning against Orion's warm flank. Yes, Elaine agreed, watching as Cooper hobbled over to join them, settling with a contented groan beside Orion. But not everyone would see it that way. 6 months after Jennifer and the twins returned to Chicago, Elaine faced her greatest fear. An anonymous complaint led to a surprise inspection from wildlife authorities concerned about the dangerous predator allegedly being kept as a pet. 2 stern-faced wildlife officers arrived unannounced on a blustery March morning. Elaine recognized one of them, Mike Brennan, a by-the-book official who had never approved of her special permission to keep Orion. We've received reports, Mike began, without preamble, that you're allowing the Bobcat to interact with children. That's a direct violation of your permit conditions. Those children were my niece and nephew, Elaine replied, evenly, and Orion has never shown the slightest aggression toward any human. Regulations don't make exceptions for family members. The second officer, a younger woman named Torres, stated flatly, we'll need to reassess the animal's status today. A knot formed in Ella's stomach. Reassess was bureaucratic language that often preceded relocation to a wildlife facility, or worse, euthanasia for animals deemed too habituated to humans. Inside, Cooper sensed the tension, immediately whining anxiously from his bed. Orion was nowhere to be seen. Small mercy, as he typically made himself scarce around strangers. The officers conducted a thorough inspection of Elaine's facilities, noting every minor infraction with disappointing thoroughness. Torres photographed the custom shelves and ramps Elaine had built for Orion, the specialized feeding station, the cat door leading to a secure outdoor enclosure. Where's the Bobcat now? Mike finally asked, flipping through his citation book with ominous deliberation. Probably hiding, Elaine admitted. He's sensitive to strangers, especially those in uniforms. As if on cue, a series of distressed whimpers came from Cooper's bed. The old dog was struggling to rise, his back legs splaying uselessly beneath him. In recent weeks, his arthritis had worsened considerably, and today seemed particularly bad. Cooper, stay down. Boy, Elaine called, moving toward him. I'll bring your medicine. Before she could reach the cabinet, However, Orion appeared silently from wherever he'd been hiding. With all eyes on him, the Bobcat padded directly to the medicine cabinet, opened it as he'd done countless times before, and selected Cooper's pain medication container. The officers watched in stunned silence as Orion carried the container to Elaine, placed it in her outstretched hand, then returned to Cooper, gently nudging the old dog back into a comfortable position. "Did that just happen?" Torres whispered, her official demeanor momentarily forgotten. Elaine administered Cooper's medication, then turned to face the officers. "This is what I've been trying to explain in my reports. Orion isn't just a bobcat I rescued. He's remarkable," Mike finished, unexpectedly, his stern expression softening as he watched Orion carefully grooming Cooper's face. "In 30 years of wildlife management, I've never seen anything like." What followed was an impromptu demonstration of Orion's extraordinary abilities, not performed as tricks for treats, but as natural expressions of his intelligence and, more importantly, his connection to his unlikely family. He adjusted the thermostat when Cooper shivered. He retrieved a water bowl when the old dog seemed thirsty. He dragged his own blanket over to cover Cooper's back. By the time the officers prepared to leave 2 hours later, their citation books remained unused. "We'll need to create a special designation," Torres said, her earlier bureaucratic rigidity replaced by genuine wonder. "This case doesn't fit any existing categories." "No," Mike agreed, watching as Orion settled protectively beside Cooper, one paw resting gently on the old dog's shoulder. "He certainly doesn't." A year later, Jennifer returned with the twins for another visit, this time finding the cabin transformed. A small brass plaque beside the door now identified it as the Orion Study Center for Interspecies Cognition, an official research facility sponsored by the state university where Frank, Elaine's neighbor, had once taught. Cooper had passed peacefully the previous winter, but his memory lived on in the hundreds of photographs lining the walls, most showing him and Orion together, an unlikely friendship that had touched countless hearts after Mike and Torres had shared their experience. Now, Orion divided his time between being Elaine's beloved companion and serving as the subject of Frank's gentle, respectful studies on animal intelligence. Each new discovery about his cognitive abilities helped shape more compassionate wildlife policies and deepened understanding of the complex minds of creatures once dismissed as operating purely on instinct. As the children rushed to greet their favorite bobcat, now comfortably sprawled in a patch of sunshine on the living room floor, Jennifer noticed something new: a framed letter hanging prominently near the entrance. It was an official document from the Wildlife Resources Commission creating a first-of-its-kind designation interspecies ambassador. Below the formal language and multiple signatures, someone had added a handwritten note for Orion, who reminds us that intelligence wears many forms. Compassion knows no species, and family is found in the most unexpected places. Elaine joined her, following her gaze to the letter. "Not bad for a bobcat with an IQ of 200, huh? I'd say he's off the charts," Jennifer replied, watching as Orion patiently allowed the children to show him their latest artwork, his amber eyes bright with what anyone Watching would swear was understanding and love. In the cabin at the edge of the Ozarks, wild and domestic continued to blur, challenging preconceptions and opening hearts. And at the center of it all was Orion. Neither fully wild nor truly tame, but perfectly, extraordinarily himself.